Good evening, everyone. It's Gordon Causey, as it always is. Trying to fix the curtain here, have a consistent backdrop. Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted on this. It is now Tuesday, the 11th of February. It's just after 9:30 p.m. I'm sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. It's 9:32. I had this scheduled to start at 9:30, but in order to entice Candy the Wonder Dog from the backyard, I had to go and rattle the packaging for a cheeseburger bacon treat. These things she goes beyond ballistic for. Look at her. Clawing all over me, wondering what do I have to do to get the magic treat in Daddy's hands. Well, you know what you have to do, Candy. Shake a paw, lay down, speak, speak. Come on, give me a good one. That's a better one. There you go. Candy has been looked after. And Danny, who is always here, or almost always, my friend from Montreal, Montreal, Quebec, Canada, bilingual, as am I, although Danny's probably more bilingual than me. I have not lived in Quebec myself for 10 years. I moved from Quebec to my current location, Northumberland County, southeastern Ontario, all the way back in 2015. But I did live in Quebec City, capital of the province of Quebec. I lived in Quebec City from 2011 to 2015. Anyway, welcome to my channel. Anyone who's new. Danny is, I'll call him a regular, long time regular, always filling up the live chat, and always greatly appreciated because I enjoy the live chat. All my videos are live, and the reason for that is I like the engagement. It animates me. I learn things. I'm given new rabbit holes to explore, and I go down a lot of rabbit holes. And I'm talking tonight. I've got Danny writing that there is a Northumberland County in New Brunswick too. I imagine there might be more than just New Brunswick in Ontario. I think Northumberland is a originally British area. Northumberland sounds British, doesn't it? Right. I love doing accents. It's fun, and I do a not bad British accent. I go all over the place. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much. If anyone's wondering what my coffee mug says, it's another one Christmas time present I got. Current mood? Nope. It's a good coffee mug to be drinking in the morning when you don't want to be dealt with. And I am not a morning person by any stretch of the imagination. I am a night hog, hence why almost all my videos are at night. I am going to be getting to the topic at hand. Are Mormons, are LDS saved? Are Mormons saved? But before I do, I always appreciate everyone. I am trying to grow my channel. Aren't all YouTubers trying to grow their channels? And I'm no different. Guilty as charged. I, do get a little, it's called, I think it's called dopamine. It's a little drug in the brain that goes off when you are engaged with, and when my numbers climb, as they have a little over the last week or two. I'm over 1,100 now. Hopefully at some point I'll get to 1,200, and who knows? We'll just let it go from there. It is what it is, but I appreciate everyone who subscribes and everyone who hits the like button. Filling up the live chat is wonderful. If you are watching this after it's done and you miss the live, the comment section is open. I love comments. I would love to hear people's thoughts on this question of whether Mormons, Latter-day Saints are saved. I know that my station, what I typically talk about is current events, and I do it through a Christian lens. I am a Bible-believing Christian. I'm not big on labels. Everyone wants to know, are you born again? Are you evangelical? Are you fundamentalist? Are you this? Are you that? I'm a Christian. That is to say that I profess Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. It should be noted, so do Mormons. So do members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a bit of an unwieldy, often you'll hear Mormons referred to as LDS, short acronym for Latter-day Saints. I believe what they call the first presidency in the church, or the prophet, who is the head of the church, somewhat akin. Churches are political organizations, so the top guy is called the prophet. And the current, I don't even know who the current prophet, who the current head of the church is, but within the last 3-4 years, he has made something of a pronouncement, along with, I believe, what they call their first presidency, that they want to get away from this term Mormon, which is used at times somewhat pejoratively in the culture, and wants people to use the full name. You're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mormon is so much easier to say, and I don't understand the reticence. If I was a Mormon, I would advise embracing the term. After all, it is the Book of Mormon is their scripture. They view it as another testament of Jesus Christ. It's not Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon. It is scripture in the eyes of LDS members, and it is called the Book of Mormon. And the choir in Salt Lake City is called the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. The picture that I have in the thumbnail for this, I'm 99% certain that is the temple in Salt Lake City, where the Mormon Tabernacle Choir sings. Growing up, my parents had an album, an old vinyl album, Christmas music as sung by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, not by the Tabernacle Choir of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Too much ink. So much shorter, Mormon. Anyway, normally on my channel, I'm dealing with, I've gone extensively into the situation in the Middle East involving Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Israelis. I've talked about the political situations unfolding in both Canada and the US, and touched on other international events of a political nature. I've talked about transgender issues during the Olympics, when a main caliph was accused of being born a man. I touch on a lot of things. So why would I be bothering, with asking the question of whether or not Mormons are saved? I'm going to try and find some connective tissue, for lack of a better word, from this question to broader questions that are more deep and more involved. And I invite you to join me on that journey as I try to find some connective tissue linking a simple question of, well, it's not really a simple question, but perhaps you might consider it a rather banal question: are Mormons saved? With some of the broader issues facing the world today. And we are facing some stark issues. The big issue, as I see it, that just happened within the last 24 hours is that the ceasefire between Hamas and the Israelis is hanging by a thread. Some might even say that it has already collapsed. What has happened in the Middle East is that Hamas has announced that they will not be releasing the 3 Israeli hostages that were slated to be released on Saturday. They are saying that Israel is in violation of the agreements of the ceasefire because they are restricting the movement of Gazans from the southern part of the Strip to the north. And they're also accusing Israel of hampering or restricting the amount of humanitarian aid coming into the Strip. Israel is denying those claims, and at the same time, they are saying that refusing to release these 3 hostages, that it threatens to blow up the entire agreement, and that And now we have President Donald Trump wading into the mix and saying that all bets are off. If all the hostages, Trump has raised the ante and said that all the hostages must be released by noon on Saturday, or all bets are off. All hell will break loose. He's equated Hamas to being bullies, and he said they're going to find out. They want to play the tough guy. Let's see how tough they are. Sounds rather ominous, but so that's kind of the end point. Now I'm starting out talking about, are Mormons saved? And I'm going to give a spoiler alert right off the bat. Here's my answer to that question. I don't know. I do not sit on the throne of judgment. It is not my place to determine whether someone, by their affiliation with one religious organization or another, are saved. I go back to the thief on the cross, a man who never attended a worship service, had never read the Bible, a man who was condemned to death justly for his actions while alive. And Jesus said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." I do not sit in the seat of judgment, so I'm not here to say that Mormons are not saved. But in thinking on this and ruminating over it over the past day or two, it occurred to me, and I've had this thought many times before, is that most of us belong to, if we have a religious affiliation, that affiliation was something that was handed to us by our parents, and we were born into it. Most Christians were born into Christian homes. They were introduced with going to church. Likewise, most Muslims were introduced to Islam through their parents and going to mosque on Fridays. Jews, same thing, born into the faith. Although I find it ironic that in the case of Judaism, both Christianity and Islam proselytize. There's a fancy word. It basically means they evangelize, they seek converts. The Jews, by contrast, if you were to go to a rabbi and say, I want to convert to Judaism, it's probably a very good chance the rabbi, the old Rebbe, is going to look at you and say, you don't want to be a Jew. Jews are not known for evangelizing. When's the last time you saw someone on TV proclaiming why you must come to Judaism for salvation? Just an interesting little sidebar note. So most Mormons in the world, likewise, were born into their faith. Mormons alive today, and actually there are probably a couple million more Mormons on the planet than there are Jews. Latter-day Saints worldwide probably number somewhere in the neighborhood of 17, 18 million. Jews, there are only about 15 million, according to organizations like Pew Research and whatever, Gallup, those who are charged with determining these statistics that guys like me get to throw out as if we know something that anyone can check this with a simple Google or DuckDuckGo, pick your search engine. No one's commenting yet. I guess I haven't said anything too controversial yet. I'm sure there will be some, though, who will be adamant in saying that, Mormons are not saved. They've been deceived. Yeah, they've been deceived since birth, just the same as, according to some Christian voices, they will say that all Hindus, all Buddhists, all Mormons, all Shintos, all whatever, fill in the blank, that they've all been deceived, but they've been deceived since birth. If that is in fact the case, that they have been deceived. I often go back to the book of the Gospel according to John, and specifically to chapter number 17, wherein Jesus, I refer to it as the unity prayer before going to the cross. Jesus prays, and as I am in you and you are in me, praying to the Father, as we are one, I, the Father, and the Father and the Son are one. So too, he wants his followers to be one. We are to be one. And yet, look at the world we have today. For a long time, up until about 1500, in and around the 1500s, prior to the Reformation, the church was largely speaking one. I'm not too thrilled with the manner in which that was enforced, burning people at the stake if they refused to convert, and things of that nature. Basically executing anyone who wouldn't convert to the Christian faith. But it did happen. And then you had the Protestant Reformation. Protestant, the root of that word is protest. It was a protest against the abuses of Rome. And then after that, goodness knows I cannot number all the denominations that shook out of that great Protestant Reformation. We have Lutheranism, we have Baptists, we have Pentecostals, we have Episcopalian, we have Mormons, we have countless denominations within the Christian faith. And some will say that they will disinclude Mormons from that because Joseph Smith added a new, well, actually, there's the Book of Mormon, which devout Mormons contend it was written by North American Jews, if you can believe that. Mormon theology is difficult to wrap your head around. It's contended that Jewish people left Jerusalem, I don't know how long ago, but in Old Testament times before Jesus, and they came by boat and they landed in North America, and there were Levites and Nephites and thisites and thatites, and as well as Native North American populations, and the two existed. And then at some point, Jesus, after his death and resurrection on the cross in Jerusalem, that he came and visited the Americas. And when you read the Book of Mormon, you'll find language presented as this is what Jesus said to the people of the Americas. And they're basically an echo of what the things that Jesus said as recorded in the Gospels. And then, in addition to the Book of Mormon, there are two books written by Joseph Smith, authored by Joseph Smith. One is called Doctrines and Covenants. And my Mormon friend from down in Texas, not Utah, Texas, Hank, is here. And when I put forward that I would be talking on this, Hank wrote down, I know I am. Our Mormons saved, our LDS members saved. Hank said, I am. I'm going to give a little more insight into my own personal theology. And that is am I 100% perfectly confident in my own salvation? And if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm going to say, no, I'm not. I'm not 100% sure of my own salvation. I do not sit in the judgment seat. The only hope I know that I have is in pointing to the cross. What have I done to deserve salvation and a reconciliation to a perfect and holy God? Nothing. I do not deserve to be reconciled to a perfect and holy God. So my only hope is through the sacrificial blood of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. But can I say with total assurance that there's never an element of doubt that creeps into my mind that maybe I'm not saved. Maybe I will, maybe could I be destined to be removed from God's wonderful holy presence? I have to acknowledge, if I'm going to be honest, yes, I do. Um, I have done 2 other videos, I think 2, maybe 3, talking about my experience with the Latter-day Saint church, with the Mormons. And I'll reiterate it now. I was 17. I was 17, and during summers and during winter breaks, like Christmas break, March break, things like that, there was a local business that I would work at. It was owned by a gentleman who I knew, Doug. And Doug owned a carpet and flooring store, and I would be a helper. Lack of a better term, I guess you would call me Joe Boy. Go to the truck and get a gallon of glue. Go to the truck and get this, that, and lug this around and move the furniture, and basically things of that nature. Swing a hammer, but nothing skilled. And it was during a winter time when I was out in the truck with Frank. Early morning. Frank was the installer I helped often, and we stopped at a coffee shop, and I was getting Frank his double and me my regular. No, Frank was 2 creams, no sugar. Remember Frank well. 2 creams, no sugar, and I would get a regular coffee, and I was waiting in line, and there were 2 young guys, a little older than me, but in the same ballpark. These 2 young guys were in front of me. I say young, they were a little older than I was, but close enough. They were in line in front of me, both wearing suits. And they looked back, saw me, and they said, "Hey, if you want to go ahead, go in front of us," which I found odd early in the morning. Snowy, cold morning. They had said, go in front of us. And they were a lot more friendly and engaging than most people are at 7:30 in the morning, lining up for a coffee. They weren't buying coffee, by the way. An inside joke for those who know the LDS faith: Mormons don't drink coffee, typically. And at any rate, I saw that they each had on their breast pocket of their suit jackets, they had black nameplates with writing in white lettering, and it said Elder Harding and Elder Holman. These were the 2 young lads who were there. And then underneath that, in the same white lettering, it said Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I had at that stage of my life, I'd never heard of it. And I said, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? What's that? And they said, oh, we're Mormons. And back then there wasn't this prohibition against the name Mormon. They said, oh, we're Mormons. And that I knew about. I had heard of the Mormons. I had a great grandmother who had become a Mormon, although she passed away when I was in grade 2. She died when I was about 7, 8, 9 years of age. So I never learned I never learned anything about the LDS faith tradition or anything uh, at all. But I did mention them. I said, "Oh, my great grandmother, my dad's grandmother, my great grandmother, she was a Mormon." They were, "Oh, really? Do you know anything? Do you know much about it?" And I said, "No, I don't know anything about it." And they said, "Would you like to learn?" And I don't know exactly how things shook out, but what I'm sure what happened is I gave them my phone number, or they gave me theirs, or we traded, whatever the case. But we later got in touch with each other, and eventually I agreed to meet with them. Uh, and I was very impressed with these 2 young men. Very personable, very just outstanding young men from everything I could gather. I'm sure they had we all have a dark side, etc., but certainly wasn't on display in any way, shape, or form. They also played basketball. One of them was from Orem, I think from Orem, Utah. That was Elder Holman, and he was 6'3", 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", and played basketball. And they would gather with other elder missionaries, and at a church in Oshawa that had a gymnasium, they would play some pickup basketball. And I was invited to go out, and basketball for me is like catnip. I was thrilled to go out and show them that a Canadian boy could hoop it up pretty darn good. Elder Holman, though, he had played NCAA Division II basketball, and he was really good, but I could hold my own with them. And they were somewhat, I like to think they were somewhat impressed that this Canadian was able to hoop it up. Back at that time, if you gave me 10 tries, I could dunk. And I'm not even 6 foot. I'm just under. I'm 5'11". Back then, I would have been 5'11" 3/4 inches. I have since shrunk. And so I went through the lessons with them. And eventually, what ended up happening is I said, thanks, no thanks. I didn't, I did not convert. I did not get baptized. Although I did, to be candid, I gave it serious consideration. What ultimately kind of broke it for me, was over the fact that their prophet, Spencer W. Kimball, had died in and around this time. And his obituary was written up in the Toronto Star newspaper. And in the obituary, it was written, Spencer W. Kimball became the prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, in whatever year he became. And they listed some, the church grew from X number to Y number over the course of his leadership. And then they also noted that in 1977 or 1978, that Spencer W. Kimball had allowed blacks to become members of the all-male priesthood. And I found that odd. Why did it take so long for the Mormon church to integrate and to, stop discriminating against blacks? The Mormon church has something called they call it the Order of Melchizedek. It's referenced in the Old Testament. It's referenced in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews. Within Mormon theology, it's held that any male can be a member of this priesthood of Melchizedek. Hank Holliday is writing, and I'm assuming you're talking about yourself, that he converted 30 years ago, and then in capital letters he writes, but ... And I know that COVID was as controversial in the Mormon church as it was in other churches, because Mormon theology holds that the United States government is almost wholly ordained that you are to obey government orders and edicts because God's hand is over. The Mormon church was born in the United States of America. I know a lot of the history, more than most non-Mormons will know. Not as much as Mormons, and certainly not as much as Mormon scholars, those who are deep into the Mormon theology. I don't know it that well, but I do know it better than most lay people who, are not Mormons. And that's largely because of these two elders and the lessons they took me through. But when I found out about this 1977, 1978, all black men were allowed to join the all-male priesthood, this order of Melchizedek, I was like, what? I could understand it to a degree if it happened in the 50s or 60s during the civil rights era. Wouldn't have been right, but I could understand it. Why did it take until 1977, 1978? And I was told by the elders that it was because blacks were Canaanites. And I knew my Bible well enough to know exactly where they were going. And they were espousing the belief that Cain, when he killed Abel, and when God put a mark upon Cain, lest any man finding him should kill him, it was their contention that the mark God put on Cain was that he made him black. And that was a step too far. I have had conversations with Mormons more recently, and they say that that theology has been walked back somewhat, that there are some who still hold to it, but I don't believe it's any longer the official position of the church. Um, but in any case, um, that was my break. That's where I said, I had some misgivings before. Many will have seen the famous South Park episode. I think it's called All About Mormons, where this kid Gary moves to South Park from Utah, where the majority of the population is Mormon. Utah is where Mormons had fled back in maybe the 1840s, I think it would have been. Mormons were being persecuted in places like New York and then Minnesota, and eventually, and after Joseph Smith, the founder of the church, had been murdered or executed, I don't know how to frame it exactly, under the leadership of Brigham Young, Mormons came to what is known as Utah today, in things like Conestoga wagons, and they settled the Utah territory. And eventually, some years later, they were offered statehood, but their offer of statehood came with a condition, and that was that the Mormon church give up on the practice of polygamy, which is something they had permitted. Mormon men were allowed to marry more than one wife until they joined the United States of America. And at that point, they gave up the practice. And the reason they still believe, most Mormons I speak to will say that they still believe that God ordains that a man can have more than one wife, but that it was a small price to pay to join in and get statehood. In a country that has something of God's hand over it. And so putting some water in the wine, if you will. Hank, you will know this better. You will know much of this history better than I. If I misrepresent anything, please let me know, because it's not my goal to misrepresent anything. And my thoughts, views, my opinions on it have evolved over time. And I've for a number of years now have viewed the fact that much of the theology, especially as presented in that South Park episode all about Mormons, and for what it's worth, while South Park deals with it in a very negative and pejorative and poking fun straw man type atmosphere, Hank Holliday says that everything I said about Brigham Young is true. Good. I don't like to misrepresent. Most will know there's a university in Utah. I think it's in Provo. I'm not sure though. Brigham Young University. They've had Steve Young, who was a left-handed Super Bowl winning quarterback with the San Francisco Giants, took over from Joe Montana. He was a graduate of Brigham Young University, BYU. Now I forgot where I was going, which is something that happens to me all the time. The joys of doing these videos live and unscripted, no notes. Actually, none whatsoever this time. The page is completely blank. I didn't even make any bullet points tonight. Sometimes I do that, make some bullet points so that I can keep on track. But when you think about mainline Christianity, I've professed myself a Bible-believing Christian. Well, many will poke fun at Christians because they'll say, you believe in a talking snake. And I forget exactly where it is, whether it's in Chronicles, Kings, but there's Balaam's donkey. There's a talking donkey in the Bible. You believe in a virgin birth. You believe in the death and the resurrection. There are a lot of, you believe that Jesus walked on water, defying the laws of, I assume to walk on water, I think that defies the laws of physics. And so um, Mormons are sometimes ridiculed by non-Mormons and even by Christians for believing that Joseph Smith claimed to have been visited by an angel, the angel Moroni, and that he was shown the place or told where to dig to find the Book of Mormon, said to have been written onto gold plates, found them in a stone box of some description with seer stone, an Urim and a Thummim, which allowed him to look through and translate from ancient hieroglyphic style writing into the English of the 1830s in the United States of America. And they, oh, sure. And then the plates, when he read them, he placed them inside a hat because he contended they needed to be in darkness because they gave off a spiritual light. And so in order to be able to read the plates, they had to be in darkness. And what Joseph Smith was doing was he was reading and translating while someone, and I forget the name of the person, was it Oliver Cowdery? I forget, was actually writing down what he said. And there's a lot of the information that is presented in this South Park episode is true. And then I don't think they cover the point that it is contended by, or was contended by, Joseph Smith and his followers that the golden plates were then taken by Moroni into heaven, so no one can ever see them again. The distressing thing for me is that Mormons, again, Hank says that he converted 30 years ago. I would venture that probably the vast majority of Mormons are born into the faith. When I was going to school, I was not aware of any Mormon students. However, I subsequently found out years later after high school that I, in fact, did have a Mormon classmate. Sherry was a member of the church. I never knew it. She didn't advertise. She didn't that word is proselytize, or however you say it. She didn't evangelize, which is something Mormons are actually called to do. Every Mormon, by the age of 25, if I'm not mistaken, is expected to go on a mission trip. They're supposed to become elder missionaries. They're supposed to go to some part of the world, and they're paired off, either men or women, 2 men always together, 2 women always together, going out and evangelizing, knocking on doors, meeting with people, and trying to bring people to what they view as God's restored church. The full story is Joseph Smith as a young teenage boy, probably 17, 18, something like that, that he was confused. You got Catholic, you've got Episcopalian, you've got Methodist, you've got Baptist, you got this, you got that, you got all these different denominations. So he prayed and said, what church should I belong to? And I think it was Moroni. He got divine intervention, told him he was not to join any of them, but rather was to establish God's true church on the earth, and that if he lived right and did things properly, that further he would be given further instruction. And eventually that further instruction led to him finding the Book of Mormon and translating it and establishing the church. Hank's writing something. I'm going to read it. Hank writes, I have read all the early original church history documents, and I've learned a lot of things that were altered in the printed LDS church narrative. I've studied them for 3 years. I would imagine you're somewhat of an outlier, not that much, but I imagine that most go along. This is the church you were brought up in. And so Bob's your uncle, all's good. And it's cultural, it's social, it's what you've been raised to believe, and fair enough. And the Mormons still believe in the Old Testament, and they still believe in the New Testament. They have not repudiated those. They have not deemed them heresy. They have not pushed them away. They have simply added to it the Book of Mormon and a couple other books that are kind of extra canonical, if you will, the Pearl of Great Price and Doctrines and Covenants. That's why they don't drink coffee. I think it's in Doctrines and Covenants. Joseph Smith had a prohibition for members against drinking hot beverages, and hot beverages at that time were pretty much exclusively coffee and tea. So Mormons don't drink coffee and tea, although I'm sure some do. My great grandmother was from Cardiff, Wales originally, and that was apparently one thing I heard after I started to investigate. My dad said that the Mormons had not convinced my great grandmother to stop. They couldn't get her to stop drinking her tea. Brits, Welsh, people from the British Isles, tea. It's hard to break away from that. And so, how am I going to get over to the situation in Israel starting here? Well, this is where the rubber hits the road for me, is the fact that we're coming up where cultures are colliding. And while, yeah, there are some differences between mainline Christianity and the LDS church, there is still something very connective there. And that is, we both LDS and most mainline Christian denominations confess Jesus as Lord. And without going too deep into the weeds regarding the theology of the LDS church and this idea that you can become a god in the three kingdoms, celestial, terrestrial, telestial, and all this other stuff, at the core, they still confess Jesus as Lord. And we're coming to an inflection point in history. This is what I wrote down in the description. And the world is, I am convinced that the world is heading to a major conflict, likely on the scale of World War I or World War II. What we are seeing take place in the world right now is very reminiscent to me of what happened in the years leading up to World War I, when the world was divided at that time into empires. British Empire, French Empire, Germans had an empire, or the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, if you prefer, Russian Empire, Ottoman Empire, Portuguese had their empire, the Dutch had their empire. You had all these different empires. And heading into World War I, in the years and even decade plus leading up to that conflict, all those empires had been engaging in, my battery is low, I got to plug back in. There we go. I am plugged back in. Uh, all these empires, there was a built up. There was militarization. They were building up their militaries prior to the outbreak of World War I. There was hyper competition in terms of trade, and there was hyper nationalism. Everyone was, wrapping themselves in their collective flags, and it strikes me, and I've read this historically as well, and many will agree. I don't think I'm on shaky ground by any stretch of the imagination in saying that World War I was going to happen regardless of whether the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo or not. Sarajevo. I sometimes like to pronounce J's. Whether Ferdinand had been assassinated or not, if that assassination hadn't taken place, some other pretext would have been found. World War I started when the presumptive heir to the Austrian-Hungarian throne, Archduke Ferdinand, he and his wife Sophia were assassinated. And that led to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire declaring war against the Serbs, against Serbia, and then basically, without going into the minutia of it, dominoes started to fall. And all the alliances that have been formulated over the past 10 plus years started to fall into place. And before you know it, the world was in conflict. And in the Western world, now the way I see things breaking down is I see a breakdown in ideology. And we have the Western world, we are fractured. The Western world by design has been fractured, and we're all in our little camps. We're in racial camps, religious camps, ideological camps. Are you right? Are you left? Are you woke? Are you not? And we're all fighting with each other. And the old line is a house divided against itself cannot stand. And this is where I think we are in trouble. Whereas let's just take a look at the Islamic world. In the Islamic world, they are divided too, but not to the same degree that we are in the West. There are two principal divisions within Islam. There are the Shia, and they are a minority of the Islamic world, probably about 10. I actually did some checking. They're in and around 10% of the Islamic world. So if you meet 10 Muslims that are representative of the entire global Muslim community, one will be Shia, the other 9 will be Sunni. The Shia regard their leadership as having been descended directly from Mohammed. That's the Shia outlook. The Sunni outlook, on the other hand, believes that their leadership is spiritually most in tune with the teachings of Muhammad as revealed in the Quran. So it's a blood lineage thing versus a spiritual thing. I haven't got a better way to describe it than that. And within Sunni, you have Wahhabi. Yeah, there are some breakdowns within the Sunni camp, but they're not nearly as pervasive as what we see in the Christian world. In the Christian world, we've got everything. Forget, yes, LDS, Latter-day Saints, and we got Jehovah's Witnesses, and we have Church of God this, and Lutheran that, and Reform this, and Pentecostal, and Episcopalian, Anglican Communion, and on and on and on. The principal division, and actually there are 3 major branches. There's the Catholic, there's the Protestant with everything underneath, but then there's also the Eastern Orthodox and Oriental churches. We are so much more divided in the West. And you take a country like Canada, the US, even in my little town, we have a Catholic church, we have a Anglican church, we have a United church, we have a Reformed church, we have a Pentecostal church, we have a Jehovah's Witness church. And this is in a town of 15,000, not even 15,000 people. I'm losing my voice. And so now we're heading to a situation where, and I think it's more than just the Islamic world against the Western world. I think there are also players, as the Chinese are certainly there. And I think what you're looking at is we're looking at a situation where there are players. I always like to use the term behind the curtain. And what they want to do is they want to sit safely back behind the curtain, watch everyone tear each other's hearts and lungs out, and then let the dust settle, see what's left of humanity when everything's all said and done. We're 8 billion people on this planet now. I brought up many times the old Georgia guidestones down in Elberton, Georgia, that had 10 guiding principles for humanity. And the number 1 guiding principle for humanity was to maintain the human population under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. So 0.5 billion versus the 8 billion we have now, that's better than a 90% reduction in the human population. And if that were to happen, what kind of world would we be looking at? And I'm trying to tread carefully because I think YouTube has an issue with that whole number one guiding principle as enumerated on the Georgia Guidestones. But you can go on to YouTube and you can find videos about these Guidestones, Georgia Guidestones, and you can read up about all the people who have written about what they call useless eaters. You can see Ted Turner, former owner of CNN, creator of CNN, and owner of it, as well as owner of the old Atlanta or the Atlanta Braves at one time. He owned the team. Uber rich, wealthy guy, being interviewed years ago by Charlie Rose, and saying that the biggest problem facing the world today is that there are too many people chasing too few resources, and that was the major issue. Many think that Ted Turner might have been the one responsible, or at least part of the group responsible for the building of the Georgia Guidestones, given his worldview. And so you get this world where we all start fighting with each other. The mass, whether we be in the Christian West, in the Islamic Middle East, or anywhere, everywhere in between, we all start killing each other, and then who gets to walk in at the end of it, and who gets to rule everything? I think that's the world we're looking at right now. And if we're going to come out of it, I think we need to be unified in Christ, as spoken of by Jesus himself in that 17th chapter of John's Gospel. I'll go to it now. I am in the Father, as I am in you and you are in me. Words. I think it's the 17th chapter. I'm 99% sure. When Jesus had spoken these words, he lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify thy Son, that the Son may glorify thee. This is John Gospel, chapter 17. Verse 2, since thou hast given him, meaning Jesus himself, power over all flesh to give eternal life to all whom thou hast given him. And this is eternal life, that they know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. I glorified thee on earth, having accomplished the work which thou gavest me to do. And now, Father, glorify thou in me. Father, glorify thou me in thy own presence with the glory which I had with thee before the world was made. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus was with God in the beginning. Verse 6, I have manifested thy name to the men whom thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them to me, and they have kept thy word. Now they know that everything that thou hast given me is from thee. For I have given them the words which thou gavest me, and they have received them, and know in truth that I came from thee, and they have believed that thou didst send me. I am praying for them. I am not praying for the world, but for those whom thou hast given me, for they are thine. All mine are thine, and thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to thee. Holy Father, keep them in thy name, which thou hast given me, that they may be one, even as we are one. I'm going to read that again. Keep them in thy name, which thou hast given me, that they may be one, even as we are one. Jesus the Son and God the Father are one. While I was with them, I kept them in thy name, which thou hast given me. I have guarded them, and none of them is lost but the son of perdition, Judas Iscariot, that the scripture might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to thee, and these things I speak in the world, that they may have my joy fulfilled in themselves. I have given them thy word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I do not pray that thou shouldst take them out of the world, but that thou shouldst keep them from the evil one. Deliver us from evil. Keep us from Satan. Keep us from temptation. Uh, they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Thy word is truth. And thou didst send me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sake I consecrate myself, that they also may be consecrated in truth. So that's a prayer for the disciples and for those of Jesus's day who followed the disciples and believed in Jesus Christ. But he goes on in verse 20 and says, I do not pray for these only, but also for those who believe in me through their word. That's speaking to you and me, because we have that word here, that they all may be one, even as thou, Father, art in me and I in thee, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. The glory which thou hast given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I in them, and thou in me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them, even as thou hast loved me. I'm going to read to the end. Father, I desire that they also, whom thou hast given me, may be with me where I am, to behold my glory, which thou hast given me in thy love for me before the foundation of the world. O righteous Father, the world has not known thee, but I have known thee, and these know that thou hast sent me. I made known to them thy name, and I will make it known, that the love which thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jesus and the Father are one. We are to be one. And whether you were born Episcopalian, Lutheran, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, there's a war of culture coming up, and we need unification. The world is getting scary. I'm fortunate, I happen to live in a very rural area. I think I'd be far more concerned probably if I was living in a large urban center like Toronto or in anywhere in the GTA. To give Americans some ideas to the size of the greater Toronto area, the metropolitan area, Toronto and its surrounding boroughs, communities, this metropolitan area is roughly the size of Houston, Texas. They're pretty much on a par. You're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 million people. Toronto itself, the city proper, is between 2 and 3 million. But the greater Toronto area, where you can hop on a train and a commuter train and go into the downtown, you're looking at 8 to 10 million. Hank is writing something. He's writing, when Jesus comes, there will be no religion, only those that have given truly their hearts to Jesus fully. Amen, brother. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And we're coming up to a difficult point in history. That's a bit of a prediction. I'm not going to put any dates on it, but the more I see the way the world is unfolding, the more I think it's coming soon. You look at this situation in the Middle East right now, where Trump is now saying if all the hostages are not returned by Saturday, that all bets are off, that all hell will break loose. Is Hamas going to release all the hostages by Saturday? I don't think they want to. I don't know how many they have remaining of the 250 plus that they originally kidnapped. I think there are still children, young children, I'm talking about under 2 years of age, being held in captivity by Hamas, and we don't even know if they're alive or dead at this point. The 3 that just came out were so emaciated, were so gaunt and thin, that it led to comparisons of places like Dachau and Auschwitz after the liberation at the end of World War II, when we saw the atrocities of the Holocaust and the manner in which the Jews had been worked to death. If not, those who were not capable of working for the German war effort were executed, and those who were capable to fuel the German war machine were worked to death. And we've all seen the pictures of Auschwitz, Dachau, Treblinka, Baden-Baden, these horrific death camps, labor camps, concentration camps, stick whatever label you want on them, where you had guys like Joseph Mengele working and performing the most disgusting, heinous experiments on human beings. And the three who were just released, you see pictures of what they looked like before, and now their skeletal remains coming out and being paraded around by these Hamas fighters with their AK-47 knockoffs or whatever machine guns they have. They look hale and hearty, while the Palestinian or the citizens of Gaza, the residents of Gaza, are claiming to be starving to death. The Hamas fighters certainly don't look like they're starving. We're heading for something. And if you're China and wanting to be the new top player in the world, the top dog in the world, having the U.S. get embroiled into a Middle Eastern conflict, just stand back and let everyone else hammer anyone ever play the game of Risk. That was always my strategy. I would try and hang out, build a large army, and have it sitting somewhere in Asia. If you know the game of Risk, I would just accumulate and just take one territory with each turn to grab my card for future armies. I attack one territory, stop, and just build one large, have all my armies concentrated in one place, not worrying about getting a continent or having enough territories to get an extra 2 or 3 armies. It's fine. And I'd let the other players batter fight over controlling us, the Australian part of the border, the North American part of the border, the European part of the South American part. Hank Wright said he loved Risk. My strategy, and I came up with it organically. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's used it, but no one taught me this. I came up with it on my own. I just decided to try it, and I found, my goodness, it's almost impossible to lose. I would just spread all my armies all over the place, and then when you start to place your armies and build up, I put them all somewhere in northeastern Asia, as far away from everyone else as I could, and everyone would say, "You're crazy, you got to get a continent." And then I would wait, and I'd have a large, while everyone else is beating each other up, I'd have this large force ready to move and swoop in on anyone who got severely weakened, and I'd get all their cards. And eventually I could take over the whole board. The only way I'd ever lose with this strategy was if a couple players ganged up on me and someone suicided me, decided they didn't want to win, but they weren't going to let me win, so they'd go and decimate my army and basically a suicide mission. And then whoever they partnered with could win the game by wiping me out. But if I was in a game where everyone was trying to win, I couldn't lose. And loved it, but it got so annoying. I started to play online a number of years ago. And what would happen is you would have one player controlling 2 armies, and they'd wipe you out. And it was very annoying, so I stopped playing. But I do like board games. So there's that, to me, is the connective tissue. We are facing a war of culture. We're coming up to a war, and the Western world, we need to be unified. And there's something of a Trojan horse which exists within pretty much the entire Western world right now. And there's an Islamic Trojan horse. In Great Britain, the most common first name given to babies now and I think for a while, is Muhammad. Islam is growing hugely in countries like Canada and Western Europe, probably in the United States as well. And if you have any concerns over it, you'll be hit with the pejorative Islamophobe ad hominem. They'll say, "You're an Islamophobe." No, I'm not phobic. Phobic is an irrational level of fear about something. An irrational fear of flying, an irrational fear of the water, an irrational fear of the great outdoors, agoraphobia. I think that one is, there are all kinds of phobias out there, and they're an irrational level of fear. Islam, that faith worries me. Christians will look back at our history and see the times where populations were murdered. We look at the auto de fe, the Spanish Inquisition, and Christians will repudiate that and recognize that it was not a Christian thing to do, to boil people in oil and to burn them at the stake for failing to convert. Islam engaged in the same type of activities, forcing people to convert at the point of a sword. However, within Islam, it's not repudiated. That was the right thing to do. Kill the infidel, kill the non-believer. There's a lot I could go on to about the conditioning that has happened in the West, where we have been conditioned to hate ourselves over our past crimes. The Western world, we are judged by our worst actions, while the Islamic world is viewed by their greatest actions. How about the Western world has done some amazing, great things as well, and some bad things, same as in the Islamic world. The Islamic world was taking slaves. They were enslaving American citizens. If you know the song from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, that song was born out of the fact that American merchant ships were being raided by pirates on the Barbary coast, and American women were being thrown into harems. It was basically sex slavery, if you want to call it that. And I don't think that's an unfair comment. And yeah, the Islamic world is as full of every sin that we think that this colonialism was the purvey of the Western powers, of the Spanish, British, Portuguese, Dutch, that these were the only colonizers. Look at the Arab world. Look at a map of the Arab world, and you'll see that it includes the Arabian Peninsula, from whence the Arab world originates. That's where they're from. They're from the Arabian Peninsula, and they colonized into other parts of Asia. Saudi Arabia or the Arabian Peninsula is on the Asian continent, but they colonized further into Asia. They went into North Africa. They went into Europe. The Arabians are colonizers. And if colonization is bad, well, let's call I don't know where this expression comes from, and it's probably politically incorrect, but I don't care. Let's call a spade a spade. If colonialism is bad, then the Arabs are bad. Then the Arab world is bad, because they too have colonized right into Europe, colonized right into the Iberian Peninsula, colonized the entire northern coast of the African continent, colonized all the way out into Afghanistan. Then they're bad. If colonization is bad, then they're bad as well. And Danny, Hank is saying, sorry they didn't say hi to Danny. You guys always are chatting. The live chat is not very full tonight, But how did I do in terms of the connective tissue? The Islamic world is largely unified, and the biggest thing, their number one goal right now, is the elimination of the nation state of Israel, and that is something we should be very concerned with. And the Islamic world has done a wonderful job of feeding into hatred of Jews and all things Jewish, and certainly Israel. And they've foisted fiction on the world that the world, much of it, especially the younger populations, especially those in college and universities, they've lapped it up willingly. That this idea that Israel is a colonialist enterprise. So you have colonizers, Arabians, Arabs, who are a colonizing people, saying that the Israelis of today colonized. Israel is on the Levantine coast. It is Arabs are from the Arabian Peninsula. They colonized. The so-called Palestinians are Arabs. They're Arab colonizers. When you get into the 1800s, when you get into the 19th century, the 1800s, the land that we call Israel today, what was then part of the Ottoman district of Syria and the Ottoman Empire, are from Turkey. They were the colonial power. Turkey was a colonial power who ruled over what is Israel now. And during Ottoman rule, this little strip of land on the Levantine coast was allowed to fall into a state of decay. By the mid 1800s, in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, diplomats, scientists, guys like Mark Twain visited the Holy Lands, wanted to see the Holy Lands, and they described what they saw. A barren, desolate wasteland where hardly any people live. And then what happened in the 1880s, 1890s, and then going forward, Jewish, mainly Europeans, but some other populations as well, started to come back to what had been their ancestral homeland and the Ottomans permitted it. And the Ottomans allowed Jews to establish themselves in their ancestral homeland, and they established farms and businesses and industry. And what happened is that Arabs then began to move in as well, because now the economy was growing in this part of the world. And so Arabs began to move in, and they became employed, and the Arabs moving in were more numerous than the Jews who were moving in, because you start a farm, a Jewish family starts a farm, and they need dozens of workers. And the dozens of workers coming in are Arab Muslim. It's fine. They work the land. And then you move forward to the end of World War II, and Jews were displaced by war. And they had nowhere to live. They had nowhere to go. They were called DPs, displaced persons. That was the vernacular in the 1940s after the Second World War ended. And the World Jewish Congress called on every able-bodied displaced Jew, said, come to Palestine. That's what it was called then. It was the British mandate for Palestine. Come to the Holy Land. Jews for centuries at the Seder table celebrating the Passover when Moses led the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. For centuries, Jews would gather around the Seder table and would say, next year in Jerusalem. Well, next year in Jerusalem in 1948, 1949, that became this year. That became the year. Because on May 15th, 1948, the British abandoned their mandate. They said, we're leaving. There is no ruling authority. This is not Ottoman territory anymore. It's not British territory anymore. It's not Mamluk Egyptian territory. It's not Persian territory. It's not Arabian territory. It's open. There's no governing authority. And what happened? 800,000 Jewish Palestinians, well, they had been Palestinians up until May 15th when the British left. They dug in their heels and they fought to create a Jewish national homeland. And they had to fight off armies from 5 invading countries, at least. The 5 main players: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. 5 invading armies came, and it was a land grab. They were not coming to create a new state. They were coming to seize territory for their countries. And that's what happened. Jordan captured Judea, Samaria on the western bank of the Jordan River. And they didn't say, okay, we're creating a new nation. No, they just said, this is ours. We're adding this to Jordan. It's our territory. It's a land grab. And then they also grabbed East Jerusalem. And then what they did is they cleansed all the Jewish population. They kicked all the Jews out of their newly acquired lands that they'd seized. So the western bank of the Jordan River, what's called Judea, Samaria, they became part of Jordan along with East Jerusalem. And the very contentious Gaza Strip became part of Egypt. That was Egyptian territory. They swallowed it up and said, this is ours. So at the end of that war, what you had is the former mandate for Palestine, the remaining part of it, had been carved up into 3 countries. Part of that territory went to Jordan and became part of their country. Part went to Egypt, and what was left was held by the Jewish formerly Palestinians, and they renamed their part Israel. It wasn't the only name on the table. New country. What are we going to call ourselves? Are we going to go back to Judea? Want to call it Judea? Do we call it Zion? And eventually the name, I'm not sure exactly how it broke down in terms of the voting or what the process was, but eventually they settled on the name of Israel, which incidentally means he who struggles with God. It was the name given by the angel to Jacob after Jacob had wrestled with the angel of the Lord all night. Jacob was given a new name. His new name was Israel, he who wrestles with God. And I think it's a fitting moniker for the nation because certainly Israel has wrestled with God throughout its entire history, going all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right through to the modern day. And now we're in a situation where a large part of the world, the Islamic world certainly, they want Israel wiped off the map from the river to the sea. The river is the Jordan River, the sea is the Mediterranean. Look at a map, that's all of Israel. They want it wiped off the map, and they want to replace it with an Islamic caliphate. They want to replace it with an Islamic theocracy of one shape, form, or another. And they want all the Jews gone, either killed or driven out. And once Israel falls, then they can set their sights on Western Europe and then on this side of the pond. And we'll be fighting, and other players will be sitting behind the curtain waiting for the dust to settle to take over. But something's going to stop it. A major battle is coming. And then the king is coming back. The king, not a king, the king, Jesus Christ, will be. I know, I started off this video talking about the Mormon church and their beliefs. Well, yes, Jesus is coming back riding on the clouds. Exactly how that will manifest, I don't know. But I pray I'm there to see it. And if not, spiritually later I'll see it. No comments from anyone. Long and windy, I know, but this world is getting crazy, as I like to say, pardon the swearing, but I'm not. Hank Holiday wants to add on something with regards to the Mormon faith or Latter-day Saint. He's saying, I feel like I should say, I do not believe anything that Brigham Young said is true. He does not believe that blacks being Canaanites, or I guess, so what you're saying is that originated with Brigham Young, that theology. And I know a lot of Mormons now repudiate it as well. Mormonism is a young faith in the sense that, it started 1830s, 1840s. I think it was in 1840 when that Brigham Young led the Mormons in the Conestoga wagon train down to Utah and basically insulated, and it allowed the faith to grow because they were insulated against, you live in Utah, you're a Mormon. I'm gonna tell a little joke that you might like. I might have told it before. I was playing golf one time down in Niagara Falls at a company tournament, and I was paired. My foursome included a guy who was from Utah, and hearing that he was from Utah, this is after my experiences with the Latter-day Saints, so I knew a fair bit about them. And I said, "Okay, Latter-day Saint?" And he's, "Oh, no." He said, "I'm one of the 15, 20 or whatever percent it is. And it's majority LDS, but not all." He goes, "No, I'm part of the 25 or whatever percent who aren't." And I said, "Oh, okay." I figured anyone I met from Utah, dollars to donuts, they were sure to be Mormon. He goes, "No, but told me this joke." He told me, he asked me, "How do you keep a Mormon from drinking all your beer on a fishing trip? How do you keep a Mormon from drinking all your beer on a fishing trip? Invite two of them." Because they're as prone to, every vice as everyone else. But if you have two of them together, tongues click. I like that. I don't know that much